Control was a religion, and Raph Corin was its most devout monk. He believed in the sacred rites of planning, the holy trinity of stealth, meticulous execution, and silence. Tonight, he was praying in a cathedral of neon and sin on Chiron, and he was beginning to suspect a goddess of chaos had just sat down at his altar. "You look like you're either planning a heist or composing a very sad poem." The voice was a low, melodic hum that cut through the bar's thrumming bass like a hot wire through ice. Raph didn't turn. He watched her reflection in the mirror-black surface of the bar top. Kyrian. Silver eyes that seemed to drink the ambient light, skin the color of a twilight sky, and a delicate lattice of fine, silvery lines that pulsed with a faint internal energy. She was a glitch in the system, a rogue variable, and every instinct he had screamed at him to solve for X. "Can it be both?" he asked, his voice a low counterpoint to hers. He finally turned, giving her his full attention. She wore a simple dark tunic that did a poor job of hiding the lean, predatory grace beneath. A slow smile spread across her lips. "A poetic heist. I like it. Stealing the tears of a forgotten star? Or are you just casing my assets?" "The latter," Raph said, deadpan, ignoring the bait. "Far more lucrative. And far less romantic." She slid onto the stool next to him, her movements fluid, her hip brushing his with deliberate slowness. She gestured to a passing server drone with a flicker of her fingers, a movement both elegant and dismissive. The drone, a polished chrome disc, wobbled in its flight path, its gyros momentarily confused by the sharp gesture. A tray of colorful, fizzing drinks tilted precariously. With a speed that seemed out of place with her languid posture, the other hand shot out and plucked a single, tall glass from the tray, a half-second before it would have spilled. She took a sip without breaking eye contact with Raph. "I'm Vesper." Raph. The muscles in his jaw had tightened at the near disaster, a reflexive annoyance, but it was immediately chased by the unwelcome thrum of his own pulse speeding up. She hadn't just moved fast. She had anticipated the failure point. "Well, Raph," she said, setting the pilfered drink down. "A man who comes to a place like the Gilded Scar to drink alone is either running from something or hunting something. Your posture says hunting. Your eyes say running." He'd been undercover for 8 months. He'd learned to build his persona like a fortress, wall by wall, lie by lie. This woman had just walked up, pointed out the cracks in the foundation, and casually stress-tested the local robotics in under a minute. "Maybe I just like the quiet," he offered, a weak defense. Vesper laughed, a sound like the subtle, multi-toned hum of a freshly charged plasma coil. "There's no quiet here. There's just noise you can ignore, and noise you can't." She leaned closer, her scent, something like the charged stillness before a storm and night-blooming flowers, overwhelming his senses. "You're trying to ignore all of it." She flagged the robotic bartender. "2 more of whatever he's drinking, and put them on the sad poets tab." Raph felt the corner of his mouth twitch. "I'm not sad." "No? Just lonely, then. It's a different flavor of quiet." She took the glass the bartender slid over, her fingers brushing his, lingering a moment too long. A jolt, a faint, pleasant warmth, like a held breath. "So, what brings you to this particular cesspool of opportunity, Raph?" He gave the standard, well-rehearsed line, the one that matched the carefully curated mess of his apartment. "Freelance security consultation. I'm chasing a contract." Her silver eyes narrowed, not with suspicion, but with a weary sort of kinship. "Let me guess. The client is a local slimeball named Stellan Riker?" "Ice," colder and sharper than the drink in his hand, traced a line down his spine. His mission target. He kept his face neutral, his gaze steady, cataloging her reaction without betraying his own. "You know him?" "We had a business arrangement," Vesper said, her tone souring. The silvery lattice under her skin pulsed with a dim, violet light of annoyance. "He deals in illegal bioweapons. I acquire certain components for him, or I did. The hulking Hessian prick tried to short me on my last run." She swirled her drink. "So, I kept the merchandise and rerouted his payment to a charitable fund for orphaned gricklworms." Raph had to actively fight a smile. "I'm sure the gricklworms appreciate it." "They'd better. I'm out 10,000 credits and had to go ground here until the heat dies down. Riker doesn't take kindly to being outsmarted." She took a long drink, then looked at him, her gaze sharp. "If you're working for him, be careful. He'll screw you over the first chance he gets." "Duly noted," Raph said. He found himself leaning closer, drawn in by her gravitational pull. "And what did you do before you were a procurement specialist for arms dealers?" She waved a dismissive hand. "Boring stuff. Corporate logistics, security retrofits." A wry, bitter smile touched her lips. "The most exciting thing I did was stress test the entire power grid for some paranoid corporate exec's orbital yacht. He was convinced his rivals were going to try and hack his toilet. I basically had to learn how to weaponize a power grid just to prove it could be done." She leaned in, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. "Turns out, it can be." His mind, the part that was always on mission, filed the information away, a critical skill set. But it was a distant process, the hum of a server in another room. The processor in the forefront was entirely occupied with her, the dangerous intelligence in her eyes, the way she made his rigid, ordered world feel like a cage he hadn't realized he was in. "You're not boring, Vesper," he said, his voice lower than he intended. Her smile softened. The witty, confrontational armor fell away for a second, and he saw what she'd seen in him, a flicker of exhaustion, a weariness with the game. "Neither are you, Raph," she whispered, "even if you pretend to be." The noise of the bar seemed to recede, the thrumming bass and clatter of glasses fading to a distant hum. There was only the low pulse of the music, and the pull of two predators recognizing each other in a jungle of prey. "My apartment," he said. It wasn't a question. "Is probably a carefully constructed facade of a hard-working freelancer," she countered, a teasing glint returning to her eyes. "A little messy, but the mess is organized. A mix of high-end vices and cheap necessities to paint the right picture." He was surprised she'd nailed it so precisely. "It is." "Good," she said, finishing her drink and sliding off the stool. "I love deconstructing a good lie." His apartment was exactly as she'd predicted, a deliberately curated lie. The main room had a work terminal covered in data slates with half-finished, fake schematics. An expensive bottle of Antarian brandy sat next to a box of cheap synth noodles on the kitchen counter. The space was designed to scream competent but not too successful freelancer. It was a perfect piece of stagecraft. Now it was a wreck, a real one. Her dark tunic was a splash of shadow on his gray synth-leather sofa, and his shirt was a ghost of a garment on the floor beside the bed. The only light came from the perpetual twilight of Chiron's cityscape bleeding through the window, and the soft, rhythmic glow from Vesper's skin. She was propped on an elbow, tracing the jagged scar that cut across his ribs. Her touch was light, inquisitive, sending shivers through him that had nothing to do with the cold. "This one looks like it has a story," she murmured, her voice husky with sleep and satisfaction. A negotiation went sideways, he said, the abbreviated, sanitized version. The real story involved a plasma blade, a failed extraction, and 3 days bleeding out in a maintenance shaft in the Morellian debris field. Most of them do. She traced the path of it again, her touch lingering, her nail scraping lightly at the edge of scar tissue. You collect scars. I collect other things. We're a disaster waiting to happen. She laughed softly, the sound vibrating through him where her body was pressed against his. We're a disaster that's already happened, Raph. This is just the aftershock. She settled her head on his chest, the silvery lines under her skin pulsing in a slow, contented rhythm, like a field of cosmic fireflies. It's been a while since I just stopped. He knew what she meant. In their line of work, you never stopped. You were always calculating, always watching, always ready. To let your guard down, even for a moment, was a luxury. To let it down for a whole night with a practical stranger was an act of reckless insanity. He'd never felt more grounded. His carefully constructed life felt brittle and hollow compared to the vibrant, unpredictable energy she brought into the space. She filled it, expanding to every corner. Me too, he admitted, his hand stroking her hair. It was softer than he'd imagined. She looked up at him, her silver eyes searching his. The wit was gone, the armor stripped away. He was looking at the woman beneath, and she was looking right back at him. You're the first person in a long time who didn't seem to be trying to figure out what they could get from me. What do I get from you? He asked, his voice a low rumble. Trouble, she said without hesitation, and a distinct lack of boredom. She leaned up and kissed him, slow and deep. A different kiss from the fiery, claiming one at the bar. This was softer, a moment of quiet surrender, a breath held in the heart of a storm. It was a silent acknowledgement that for all their cynical armor, they had found something rare and real in the galaxy's grimiest corner. He held her tighter, pulling the universe down to this single point. Her, him, the bed, the quiet. For a man who worshipped control, he had never felt so good losing it. The silent, encrypted message was a splash of cold water. It flashed on the minimalist interface of his datapad, stark and uncompromising against the dim light of the bedroom. Execute. Just one word. He'd been waiting for it for 3 weeks. Stellan Riker was hosting a private auction on the top floor of his corporate tower. Security would be focused on his high-profile guests, leaving a blind spot in his personal command center. It was the perfect window. A window that was closing. As he read the word, a second alert popped up below it, flagged with a high-priority warning icon. Standard dead prop compromised. Insurgent activity detected. Emergency delivery procedure initiated. Package en route to your designated residence. Acknowledge. A curse died in his throat. Delivery to his apartment. To his cover. It was a massive breach of procedure, a risk he would never have taken by choice. But the system had made the choice for him. He tapped the acknowledge button, his jaw tight with frustration. He slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Vesper. She murmured in her sleep, a series of soft clicks and chimes, a Kyrian dream curse maybe, and curled into the space he'd just vacated. He watched her for a moment, an unfamiliar ache in his chest. This was the job. This was the mission. She was a complication he couldn't afford, and one the ISB had just put directly in the line of fire. A soft whirring sound drew his attention to the window. A delivery drone, matte black and silent as a phantom, hovered outside, its magnetic clamps attaching a small, featureless container to the exterior of the glass. He keyed in the release code on his datapad. The container detached and slid through the apartment's secure delivery port. He opened it. Inside, Nestled in soft gray foam was a single, sleek vial. The label, an elegant, looping script, read, Azurian Nootropic Focus Blend. A lie. Inside was AMP, the experimental combat serum. He pictured the dry, jargon-filled briefing file he'd been forced to memorize. Neurochemical agent, designed to overclock a human nervous system, for 15 minutes of enhanced reflexes and cognitive speed. Plausible deniability packaging. What's that? He spun around. Vesper stood in the doorway to the bedroom, wearing his shirt. It hung off her frame, the hem barely reaching her mid-thighs. She looked rumpled, soft, and achingly beautiful. His professional instinct screamed threat, but the rest of him just screamed. It's... duh. He had to think fast. She walked toward him, her steps silent on the cold floor. She wrapped her arms around his waist from behind, resting her chin on his shoulder, and peering at the vial in his hand. Azurian Nootropic Focus Blend, she read. Sounds pretentious. It is, he said, his voice a little tight. It's, an energy supplement from my employers, part of a new wellness initiative. A wellness initiative that involves back-alley drone drops in the middle of the night? She teased, her breath warm against his neck. They're very serious about wellness. He recalled the absurd corporate doublespeak from the briefing, the part he'd skimmed and dismissed. He delivered it with a layer of genuine sarcasm. The internal memo was a joke. Something about how the blend is so potent it can cause cognitive dissonance, and should be shared to promote synergistic harmony. Corporate nonsense to make you feel like you're part of a team. Synergistic harmony, she murmured, her lips brushing the side of his neck. I like the sound of that. Her hands started to roam downwards, her fingers tracing the waistband of his pants. The mission, Riker, the serum. It all seemed to fade into a dull background hum. She was a gravity well, pulling all of his attention, all of his vaunted control, into her orbit. Forget the synergy. Let's harmonize something else. She tugged him back toward the bedroom. His mind was a battlefield. The safe. The professional part of him screamed. Lock it in the high-security safe in the floor. But that would mean explaining the safe, explaining the drone. The questions would unravel his cover completely. It was a risk, a stupid one. He looked at her, at the playful, lustful light in her eyes. He made a choice. A small, foolish, catastrophic choice. He turned to the small kitchen unit, opened a cupboard, and shoved the vial of AMP behind a box of cheap synthetic coffee grounds. A problem for later. Right now, he had a much more pleasant problem to deal with. The smell of coffee, rich and real, not the synthetic crap he kept for appearances, dragged Raph from a deep, dreamless sleep. He sat up, a disoriented frown on his face. He kept the real stuff hidden for long stakeouts, a small personal luxury. He found Vesper in the kitchen alcove, humming a cheerful off-key tune. She was still in his shirt, her hair a delightful mess, and she was stirring 2 steaming mugs. The empty, elegant vial of Azurian Nootropic Focus Blend sat on the counter beside her. His blood ran cold. "Morning," she chirped, turning to him with a brilliant smile. The silvery lines beneath her skin were already glowing with a happy, golden light. "I found your secret stash of the good coffee. Figured you wouldn't mind if I partook." He couldn't speak. He could only stare at the empty vial. His gaze was an anchor, and his stomach was a stone dropping into a bottomless ocean. "I also used your focus blend," she continued, oblivious to the abyss that had just opened up. "You were right. That corporate memo was hilarious, but the idea stuck. Seemed rude for one of us to get all synergized and leave the other in the dust." She gestured to the 2 mugs with her spoon. "So I split the whole vial between us, to balance the cognitive load and all that." The words landed like ice shards in his gut. The entire vial split between them. His career was over. That was his first thought. A flash of pure, selfish panic. His meticulously constructed cover, his years of service, all of it, vaporized in an instant because he couldn't resist her for one night. Then, a second, much worse thought crashed down on top of it. A tidal wave of ice-cold dread. It's an experimental drug designed exclusively for human physiology. The file said non-human interactions were undocumented, untested, and theoretically catastrophic. What the hell is it going to do to a Kyrian? I might have just killed her. He finally found his voice. It came out as a strangled rasp. Which cup? She shrugged, a casual, happy movement that felt like a knife twisting in his gut. I split the powder evenly, then poured the coffee. Why? Did you want the one with the chip on the rim? She picked up one of the mugs and took a long, deep sip, closing her eyes in satisfaction. That's the good stuff. Has a weird, sugary aftertaste, though. Raph stared at the two identical mugs. There was no way to know. He grabbed the remaining mug and downed half of it in 3 long, desperate swallows. The coffee was good, but the underlying taste was electric. A faint, metallic sweetness that coated his tongue. He waited for the kick, for the surge of hyper-awareness the tech specs had promised. Nothing. A mild warmth spread through his chest, like a good whiskey, but his thoughts remained stubbornly normal speed. Right, he remembered from the briefing. The catalyst is a massive adrenaline spike. Without the trigger, the half dose is probably no stronger than a shot of caffeine. He was operating blind. He was compromised. And the captivating, infuriating, beautiful woman he'd spent the night with was a walking, talking time bomb. And he had lit the fuse. Vesper was leaning against the counter, watching him with an amused glint in her eyes. In a hurry to get synergized? Just thirsty, he lied, his heart hammering against his ribs. He was trying to watch her, to see any sign, any tell, sickness, pain, anything. She looked fine, more than fine. She looked radiant. You're a terrible liar, Raph, she said, her voice soft. You've been staring at me like I'm about to either explode or start quoting bad poetry. What's in that stuff? Before he could formulate another lie, she trailed off. Her smile faltered, replaced by a look of faint confusion. She brought a hand to her temple. That's weird. What? What's weird? He asked, his voice sharp with adrenaline, every nerve ending on fire. I feel... She closed her eyes, a shiver running through her. This warm, tingly hum. It's not in my head. It's everywhere. It feels like... Her eyes snapped open. They were wide, the silver irises seeming to swirl like liquid metal. Her pupils were blown wide. Like, I can hear the electricity in the walls. And... Oh, wow. As he watched, frozen, the lattice of lines on her nose and cheekbones flared. They went from a soft, gentle pulsing to a blazing, incandescent violet, as if someone had ignited a network of stars just beneath her skin. The light was so intense, it cast dancing purple shadows on the wall behind her. Vesper? Her hand, the one not holding the mug, fumbled, her fingers suddenly uncoordinated. The ceramic slipped. Time seemed to stretch, to warp. He saw the mug fall, saw the coffee begin to splash out in a perfect, suspended arc. He moved to catch it, but his human reflexes felt thick and slow, like he was moving through molasses. She wasn't. Her other hand, the one holding her own mug, shot out in a blur, a flicker of motion too fast for the eye to properly track. Her fingers snapped around the falling mug, snatching it from the air an inch from the floor. Not a single drop of coffee spilled from either cup. Silence. The only sound was the faint, high-pitched hum that now seemed to emanate from her very skin. She slowly straightened up, looking from the mug in one hand to the mug in the other, then at her hands themselves, as if they belonged to someone else entirely. Her silver eyes, glowing with a terrifying, beautiful light, met his. There was awe in them, but also a raw, predatory hunger that hadn't been there before. "Okay," she breathed, her voice a vibrant, resonant purr that seemed to vibrate in the air between them. "That is definitely not a nootropic." "I need to get dressed," Vesper announced, her voice buzzing with an energy that was now clearly more than just adrenaline. She set the mugs down with exaggerated care, and then zipped across the apartment to the bedroom, not running, but moving with an unnerving, fluid speed. "This shirt is great, but I feel like I could run a marathon and then have you for dessert. Don't want to chafe." Raph's mind was a frantic scramble of shattered procedures and terrifying new variables. Abort the mission. That was the only sane option. Call it in, report the compromise, contain the asset, and prepare for a career spent counting ball bearings in a subarctic penal colony. But if he aborted, Madsen would want to know why. The truth would mean they would descend on Vesper, treating her like a lab experiment, a biological anomaly to be dissected and studied. The serum had clearly triggered something in her Curian biology, something primal. A mating cycle, maybe? They would put her in a cage. The thought was unacceptable. He couldn't abort. He couldn't leave her here alone. A superpowered civilian fizzing with undocumented alien drug interactions. She'd probably try to rewire the city's power grid out of sheer boredom, or proposition the first 10 people she saw. Which left one option. The worst option. The only option. He had to take her with him. She reappeared, now in her own dark tunic and pants, practically vibrating with restless energy. "Okay, what's the plan? And don't say wellness initiative, because I just counted the individual dust motes dancing in that sunbeam, and I'm pretty sure I could get off just by thinking about it. I'm feeling a little more than well." He took a deep breath, forcing the monk of control to reassert itself over the screaming chaos in his head. "The plan is an assassination." She stopped bouncing. Her silver eyes focused on him with laser-like intensity. "Who?" "Stellan Riker." A slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. It was not the playful grin from before. This was sharp, predatory. The violet light in her skin pulsed once. Hard. "Riker? The prick who screwed me over?" Her voice dropped, losing its cheerful buzz for a low, intense hum. "Forget your mission, handler. This is personal now. I'm not just helping you. I'm collecting a debt. With interest." She had a stake now. A real one. That was good. It was also terrifying. "The original plan was stealth," he continued, trying to reclaim some semblance of order. "Infiltration via the sub-level maintenance corridors. Bypass security and terminate the target. No noise, no witnesses, no contact. In and out like ghosts." She gave him a dazzling, slightly manic grin, her eyes glittering with power. "Ghosts? Boring. Let's be poltergeists. I hear they're much more hands-on." "No," he said, his voice flat. "We are not being poltergeists. We are being professionals." "You can be the professional," she shot back, the bounce returning to the balls of her feet. "I'll be the chaotic, unpredictable force of nature that gets us through when your boring plan falls apart." "My plans do not fall apart." "Everything falls apart eventually, Raph. It's the primary rule of the universe." The drive to Riker's tower was a special kind of hell. Raph piloted the stolen sky speeder with a white-knuckled grip, trying to fly a conservative, below-the-radar route through the city's lower transit lanes. Vesper, however, had discovered the speeder's inertial dampener controls. "I bet it can do a barrel roll," she said, her fingers hovering over the console. "Don't touch that!" he growled, batting her hand away. "You're no fun. You've been dosed with a miracle drug and all you want to do is follow the traffic laws. Think of all the other laws we could be breaking. The fun ones." "It's not a miracle drug. It's a military-grade combat stimulant that could cause your heart to explode." "My heart feels great," she chirped. "It's beating about 300 times a minute, but it's a happy, energetic beat. Everything feels great. Especially you. All tense and in control. It's hot." A crackle in his ear made him jump. A high-priority, audio-only comlink. Director Madsen. Of course. Her timing was impeccable. "Status, Corin?" Her voice was cold, clipped, and radiated impatience. Raph struggled to keep his own voice level, to project the calm, controlled demeanor of his operational persona. "Everything is green, Director," he said, gritting his teeth. "Proceeding to the objective. No complications." As he spoke, he was forced into a quiet, vicious wrestling match over the control stick. Vesper, with her newfound Kyrian super strength, was trying to yank the speeder into a steep, high-G climb, laughing as she pressed her body against his arm to get more leverage. He pushed back, muscles straining, a sheen of sweat on his brow, all while maintaining the placid tone for his superior. "Glad to hear it, Corin," Madsen said, oblivious. "The window is closing. Don't disappoint me." The comlink clicked off. Raph finally managed to shove Vesper's hand away from the controls. The speeder wobbled violently before he stabilized it. "What part of no complications are you having trouble with?" he hissed. She grinned, a flash of white teeth in the gloom of the speeder. "The no part." The service entrance to Riker's tower was exactly where the schematics said it would be. Raph disabled the electronic lock with a quiet sizzle from his wrist-mounted jammer. He drew his silenced ballistic pistol. "Stay behind me. No noise." "You keep saying that," Vesper whispered, her voice a low purr of excitement at his shoulder. "I don't think it means what you think it means." They slipped inside. A long, concrete corridor stretched before them. Halfway down, two of Riker's guards were sharing a cheap synth cigar. Raph flattened himself against the wall, motioning for Vesper to do the same. His plan was simple. Wait for them to separate, then take them down. Silent, efficient, controlled. Vesper moved first. He opened his mouth to hiss a warning, but it was too late. She scooped up a length of rusted metal pipe. She wasn't aiming at the guards. She was aiming at the wall 10 feet to their left. She threw the pipe with a flick of her wrist. It screamed through the air and struck the concrete wall with a loud clang. It was a ricochet of stunning, improbable accuracy. The pipe spun, a solid steel blur, and slammed into the side of the first guard's head. He dropped like a sack of rocks. The second guard, startled by the noise, spun around, fumbling for his rifle. The sound had been the perfect distraction. He saw the first guard begin to turn, and in the space of a heartbeat, Vesper was already past him, a violet-tinged shadow. A sharp crack echoed through the corridor, as she disabled him before he could even register her presence. The engagement had taken less than 3 seconds. It was also loud, messy, and completely outside of ISB operational doctrine. His body moved without a thought, a series of honed reflexes screaming at him that this was a failure. His gut, however, saw the result. 2 neutralized hostiles, 0 alarms. It was effective. He grit his teeth. The sheer, terrifying effectiveness of her madness, a bitter pill to swallow. Vesper turned back to him, dusting off her hands. The violet glow under her skin was bright with satisfaction. She gave him a look that was pure, undiluted innocence. "What?" she asked. They're neutralized. A moment later, a strident, howling alarm began to blare. An automated system, tripped by the sound of the impact. So much for his gut feeling. "Well," Vesper yelled over the siren, a wide, unholy grin on her face. "There goes the neighborhood." Stealth was dead and buried. The poltergeists were in the building. Raph shoved the useless silencer into his pocket and slammed a fresh magazine into his pistol. "This way! The central stairwell!" They sprinted. A heavy security door hissed open ahead of them, and 4 more guards spilled out, rifles already raised. Raph dropped to one knee, snapping off 2 precise shots. Double taps, center mass. His body moved on its own, a bastion of order in the chaos. 2 guards went down. Vesper didn't even slow down. "Bet I can take out more than you," she shouted, her voice laced with laughter. "Winner gets to be on top tonight." He felt a surge of pure fury at her, turning this into a game. This was his life, his mission. But another part of him, a part he didn't recognize, wanted to win. "You're on!" he yelled back, surprising himself. As the remaining 2 guards opened fire, she veered to the side, sliding across the slick floor with a sensual grace. The plasma bolt sizzled through the air where her head had been. Her hand shot out and grabbed the base of a heavy, life-sized marble statue of some pompous-looking Hessian ancestor. With a grunt of effort that was half growl, she wrenched it from its moorings. Raph expected her to hurl it at the guards. Instead, with a sharp cry, she heaved the massive statue upwards. It smashed into the ceiling, striking a critical support pillar. A huge section of the ceiling, conduit pipes and all, collapsed directly on top of the 2 remaining guards, burying them under a ton of debris and blocking the corridor. He stared at the pile of rubble. It was tactical chaos. She wasn't just fighting. She was weaponizing the environment. His training screamed at him to fall back, to reassess. But his gut saw the truth. She was collapsing their entire system. She skidded to a halt beside him, breathing a little fast, her eyes shining. "That's 2 for me. Looks like I'm winning." A slow, incredulous smile he couldn't stop spread across his face. He was in a death trap. His mission was a shambles, and he was partnered with a certifiable lunatic. "The competition is not over," he said, pushing them both toward the stairwell door. They burst into a multi-level atrium. Gunfire erupted from everywhere at once. Guards on the catwalks above, more pouring in from the levels below. A kill box. "My turn," Raph yelled, shoving her behind a thick support column. He leaned out, fired 3 shots, and took out a sniper on a balcony 2 floors up. "That's 3-2. I'm in the lead." "That's cute," Vesper shot back. She pointed. "See that giant holographic ad projector?" A massive, spherical device hung in the center of the atrium, projecting a hazy image of Riker's smug face. "What about it?" "Its power cell is probably unstable," she yelled gleefully. "I need a big bang, Raph. A really big one." "How do you know that?" "I don't, but it's worth a shot." Before he could argue, she broke from cover. She ran along the low wall, plasma fire chewing up the metal at her heels. She leaped, her serum-enhanced muscles launching her into an incredible acrobatic flip. In mid-air, she drew the discarded plasma rifle from the guard she'd taken out in the hall. She fired once. A single, perfect shot that hit the projector's primary power conduit. The device sparked violently. The hologram of Riker's face flickered, distorted, and then the entire sphere exploded in a blinding flash of white light and deafening boom. The concussive force blew out every glass panel in the atrium and sent half the guards on the catwalks flying. The room went dark. The only light was the strobing emergency beacons and the violet glow from Vesper, who landed in a perfect crouch, looking entirely too pleased with herself. "I think that one counts at least 5, she said, her voice echoing in the sudden, ringing silence. "I win." Raph grabbed her arm and yanked her into the shadows of a service corridor, just as more guards began to pour into the ruined atrium. He slammed the door shut, plunging them into near-total darkness. The silence was broken only by their ragged breathing and the distant, muffled shouts from the atrium. "What?" he hissed, his voice a low, furious whisper. "The hell was that?" "That was me winning," she whispered back, her voice still buzzing with a potent mix of adrenaline and arousal. Even in the dark, he could feel the heat pouring off her. "That was you blowing up half the floor. My plan was surgical. This is a detonation." He ran a hand over his face, the frustration warring with a grudging, terrifying admiration. "This is a nightmare. Every regulation is broken." "Is it?" she challenged, her voice close in the dark. "Are we dead?" "No." "Is Riker's security team in chaos?" "Yes." "Are we closer to him now than we were 5 minutes ago?" He hated that she was right. "Yes." "Then it sounds like a pretty good nightmare to me," she said. He felt her hand find his in the darkness. Her grip was warm, solid. "Your way is clean, Raph. Meticulous. But it's brittle. It breaks when things get messy. My way starts messy. And it's much more fun." He stood there for a long moment, her words sinking in. The monk of control in his head was screaming sacrilege, but the soldier who survived the Morellian debris field knew the truth. No plan survives contact with the enemy. He'd just never had a partner who was the contact. He squeezed her hand. "Fine. But from now on, the bad ideas, we discuss them first." He felt her smile in the darkness. "We can discuss them. Doesn't mean I'll listen." They were pinned down. Server room, 87th floor. A platoon of Riker's elite guard was trying to turn the reinforced door into a slag with plasma cutters. Another squad was rappelling down the building, preparing to breach the windows. Raph's tactical mind was running simulations and coming up with the same answer. 0. No way out. He was reloading his last magazine when Vesper spoke. "I've got a bad idea." "We've moved past bad ideas, Vesper. We're in the territory of certifiably suicidal hallucinations." "No, this is a really bad one," she said, her eyes glowing with that familiar, terrifying intensity. She was looking at a thick bundle of armored-powered conduits that fed the entire floor. "The kind of bad idea that gets you posthumously awarded a medal for creative problem-solving, and it feels like exactly the kind of release I need right now." His mind flashed back to her words. "I basically had to learn how to weaponize a power grid. Turns out, it can be." His training screamed at him to stop her. His new, chaotic reality just made him ask, "What are the odds?" 50-50 it works," she said, ripping a maintenance panel off the wall with a screech of tortured metal. 100% we're dead if I don't try." She plunged her hands inside the nexus of raw, humming power. Sparks flew. The lights flickered violently. The hum of the servers pitched into a high-powered, agonizing whine. "Get ready!" Vesper screamed over the noise, a look of ecstatic concentration on her face. She yanked a fistful of cables free and slammed them against a different contact point. The world exploded in light and sound. Every electronic device on the floor overloaded simultaneously. The result was a cascading series of detonations that blew the main door off its hinges and sent a shockwave of concussive force and strobing darkness through the hallway. In the chaotic, seizure-inducing strobes of dying electronics, she grabbed his hand. "Come on!" He didn't hesitate. He grabbed her arm, spinning her around to face him. The emergency lights cast them in a hellish red glow. "That was the most brilliant, insane thing I have ever seen." He tightened his grip, pulling her closer. "Never do it again." A slow, triumphant grin spread across her face. "No promises, Handler. Riker's office is at the end of this hall. Let's go finish this." They didn't bother with the door to Riker's command center. Raph kicked it open. Stellan Riker stood behind a massive desk, made from the skull of some extinct Leviathan. He was not flanked by bodyguards. He was encased in one. A heavy-class combat exosuit, military grade by the look of it, hummed around his bulky frame. A plasma repeater was mounted on one arm. A heat haze of energy wavered on the other. "Corin!" Riker sneered, his voice a distorted, metallic rumble. "And the little freelancer! I should thank you. You've saved me the trouble of hunting you down." Vesper, true to form, moved first. She was a violet blur, crossing the room to get inside his range. She struck at his head, but her blow, which would have shattered bone, sparked harmlessly against the energy of the kinetic shield. The feedback threw her back several feet. Riker laughed. "Fast! But speed means nothing against superior firepower." He raised the plasma repeater. "Vesper, left!" Raph yelled, laying down suppressing fire on the exosuit's torso, his ballistic rounds pinging uselessly off the heavy armor. It was a distraction, nothing more. She dodged, the plasma bolts melting the floor where she'd been. The suit was powerful, but it was slow to track a target as fast as her. That was their opening. "His shield is kinetic!" Raph shouted, his mind racing, analyzing the new tactical problem. "It absorbs impact! We can't break it, we have to overload it!" "How?" she yelled back, weaving between pieces of expensive, destructible furniture. "The heat vents! On the back of the torso unit! They have to cycle the shield's waste energy!" His tactical brain saw the flaw, the single point of failure. "I'll draw his fire! Get behind him!" "On it!" Raph stepped out from cover. "Hey, Riker! Your chrome suit is compensating for something!" The crime lord roared in anger and turned his full attention, and his plasma repeater, on Raph. He dove behind the Leviathan's skull desk as a torrent of plasma turned his previous cover into molten slag. It was the opening Vesper needed. She used the distraction to sprint up a wall, kick off, and land silently on the back of the massive exosuit, like a predator mounting its prey. Riker, focused on Raph, didn't even feel her. She grabbed the discarded plasma rifle from her back, the one she'd used on the projector, and jammed its barrel deep into the primary heat vent. Then, she pulled the trigger. The effect was instantaneous. Raw plasma flooded the suit's internal cooling system. A high-pitched whine filled the room as every system overloaded. The kinetic shield flickered and died. The suit seized, locking in place. A cloud of acrid smoke poured from its joints. With a final metallic groan, the exosuit powered down, becoming a hulking, inert coffin. Vesper hopped off, landing lightly on the floor. She gave the frozen suit a little pat on the helmet. "Debt collected," she said, her voice a breathy whisper of satisfaction. Raph rose from behind the desk, his pistol lowered. He looked at the neutralized target, the smoking ruins of the command center, and the incredible, unbelievable woman standing victoriously in the middle of it all. Their insane, chaotic, synergistic plan had worked. Raph stood at attention in his wrecked apartment. Before him, the angry, three-dimensional face of Director Madsen hovered in the air. As she spoke, he was acutely aware of Vesper behind him, stretching languidly like a cat, her movements deliberate, slow, and provocative. It was making it very hard to concentrate. "Explain this, Corin," she said, her voice dangerously calm. "My directive was for a surgical strike. What I am watching looks like you handed a bag of explosives to a toddler and let her run wild in a museum." "With all due respect, Director," Raph said, his voice level. "The toddler got the job done." She also caused an estimated 40 million credits in property damage and took down a target armed with a restricted military exosuit you failed to identify in your initial intel, Madsen countered, her eyes like chips of ice. You compromised this entire operation with a civilian. You're finished. Director. A tinny voice cut in from Madsen's end. Jarvik, the tech. The preliminary data from the asset's biosigns is unprecedented. We're seeing a permanent bio-imprint from the serum. Her abilities aren't temporary. It seems to have triggered a latent biological state. The readings of the energy, they're off the charts. Madsen's expression shifted from anger to cold calculation. Go on. She's a permanent, undocumented superhuman, Director. A Class 1 anomaly. And she's my responsibility, Raph cut in, seizing the moment. He knew he was walking a razor's edge. The mission parameters failed. My partnership with her did not. The result is a proof of concept. My structure, her chaos. It works. Madsen stared at him, her silence a weapon. He had defied her, failed in his mission as assigned, and was now dictating terms. He should already be on a transport to a black site. But the data, the result. There's a provision in the ISB charter, she said finally, her voice low and sharp. Article 7 Gamma. For the emergency deputization of non-aligned assets with unique and strategically vital capabilities. It's an archaic rule, a relic from the expansion wars. No one has used it in a century. She gave him a cold, predatory smile. Congratulations, Corin. You're reactivating it. Vesper is your problem now. She's assigned to you as a temporary partner, pending review. Raph felt a surge of relief, so profound it almost buckled his knees. But let's be clear, she continued, leaning into her holographic projector. Don't mistake this for a promotion. It's probation. You have one chance to prove this new doctrine of yours isn't just a fluke that burned down a skyscraper. Don't fail. Because Article 7 Gamma also has a clause for summary termination of compromised assets. The threat hung in the air, cold and absolute. Keep her close, Corin. Very close. Madsen out. The hologram vanished, plunging the apartment back into a heavy silence, broken only by the distant wail of city sirens. He turned. Vesper was leaning against the far wall, arms crossed, a tired but triumphant smirk on her face. The violet glow under her skin had receded to a soft, pulsing shimmer, like embers after a fire. So, she said, her voice dropping back into the sultry, teasing tone she'd used in the bar what felt like a lifetime ago. Article 7 Gamma, huh? Sounds like a good way to get yourself disappeared. She pushed off the wall and walked toward him, her movements still holding that fluid grace, but now tempered with a weariness that matched his own. And I'm your temporary partner. Pending review, she continued, stopping just in front of him. Your handler? Looks that way, he said, his professional mask gone, stripped away by explosions and overwhelming odds. All that was left was something raw and real. A leash, she murmured, her silver eyes searching his. Probation. Sounds like you're in almost as much trouble as I am. Raph closed the small distance between them. He put a hand on her waist, the fabric of her tunic rough under his palm, and pulled her flush against him. He could feel the faint, energetic hum of her body, a permanent part of her now, a permanent part of them. Yeah, he said, his voice a low growl that was part threat, part promise. Guess that means I get to handle you whenever I want. Her smirk widened into a brilliant, wicked grin. She looped her arms around his neck, the silvery lines beneath her skin brightening with renewed mischief. "I'm counting on it, Handler." He kissed her. The kiss was one of pure, unadulterated beginning, the first page of a brand new and utterly chaotic book. And he couldn't wait to see what happened next.